Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, new at the Disney MGM Studios.
Tower of Terror, located at multiple Disney parks across the world, is often considered one of the best and scariest drop towers out there. But it's not just a drop tower, it's an immersive dark ride experience along with a drop tower. Over the years, there have been a total of 4 Tower of Terrors built and 1 retheme, each having their own key distinct differences. Today, I'll be explaining each version of the ride, starting with the original Tower of Terror, located at Disney's Hollywood Studios, opened to the public on July 22, 1994, after 5 years of planning and construction by Walt Disney Imagineers. According to Imagineer Gary Lundrum, the original idea for the attraction was to create a real working hotel with a ride built into it. However, Michael Eisner quickly shut down that idea due to concerns about the guest experience, so Imagineers went back to the drawing board. Eventually, they picked up the Twilight Zone theming as a way to expand into IPs other than just Disney-owned properties. But they ran into a bit of a problem. How would guests end up in the Twilight Zone? They eventually decided that a bolt of lightning would strike the tower, sending the elevator and its guests directly to the Twilight Zone. To begin the experience, guests enter the queue and walk through the courtyard of the hotel. They may notice the Spanish colonial-inspired architecture and overgrown plants and gardens. Everything looks run down and vacant. You then enter the hotel lobby, which is filled with 1930s props and items from the show. The whole place looks like it was left untouched for decades, as it's covered in cobwebs and dust everywhere. After moving through the lobby, guests find themselves in the library, where they will encounter the pre-show. A TV flickers on, and Rod Serling, the narrator of the Twilight Zone, explains that 5 guests boarded an ordinary service elevator, then lightning struck the building, sending them straight into the Twilight Zone.
Still in operation, waiting for you. We invite you, if you dare, to step aboard, because in tonight's episode, you are the star, and this elevator travels directly to the Twilight Zone.
Guests then exit the library into the cellar with all kinds of electrical wires and metal pipes. Then the guests come up to the loading platform, where they are assigned rows and the boarding process begins. You board the ride vehicle in one of 3 rows. The first 2 rows feature 7 seats, while the back has 8. The cast member checks everyone's seatbelt, and then the ride experience begins.
You are the passengers.
The ride starts, and you travel up about 50 feet to the first show scene, where you see 5 guests get struck by lightning and they travel to the Twilight Zone. The room then turns dark, where all you see is stars and a window at the end of the hallway. The window then breaks and the elevator closes, concluding the first scene of the ride. After the hallway scene, you then travel up to the next scene of the ride, called the 5th Dimension scene. Your ride vehicle actually moves out of the elevator shaft and you start moving forward through the scene. You see all kinds of crazy stuff, like giant floating eyeballs, pictures of guests, windows breaking, lightning, stars, and then at the end of the room, you see stars form in front of the elevator door. The elevator door then opens and you cross over into the 5th dimension, aka the Twilight Zone. There are many different randomized drop sequences. You might go up first, you might go down, there's no telling what's going to happen. One thing for sure that happens every time is you coming all the way to the top of the tower, where the elevator doors open and you get an amazing view of the park for about 0.2 seconds. Then you plummet back down towards impending doom. The ride then ends with a screen of a swirly optical illusion looking thing, and random elements of the ride start to get sucked into it, signifying that the ride is over and you are back in the real world. Your vehicle then turns and the elevator doors open, where the cast member lets you out, and you can go right into the gift shop, where you can spend all of your money. The ride was an instant hit amongst park goers, and it was the most thrilling ride that Disney had built up until that point. So the folks over in California were wondering when they're going to have their turn. A few years after the original opened, Disney began construction on a new theme park in California to go alongside Disneyland. In 2001, they opened California Adventure to mostly negative reception and spent the next few years trying to right their wrongs. One of those fixes was a new version of the Tower of Terror, which opened in 2004 with some major changes. The first change guests will notice is that the building design is entirely different. Instead of Spanish colonial architecture, it's inspired by desert art deco. The outdoor queue is smaller, and while the indoor portion has some differences, it's basically the same. The pre-show is also the same, aside from the exterior shots of the redesigned hotel.
Hollywood, 1939.
Once you board the ride is when the major differences become more obvious. One big change is that the show starts before you even leave the station. The swirly optical illusion looking thing I mentioned earlier appears, and then you rise up to the mirror scene, which is new to this version of the ride. You see a reflection of yourself in the mirror, and you are told to wave goodbye to the real world. You then see your reflection get struck by lightning. It's an awesome effect that really reinforces the idea that you are the star of the episode. Next, you rise to the second scene of the ride, which is similar to the hallway scene in Florida, but at the end, instead of seeing a window, you see the guests in an elevator, which then drops. Then you drop, beginning your drop sequence, which is the same every time, unlike Florida's randomized drops. You'll also notice the complete absence of the fifth dimension scene. This was removed due to how expensive and complex it would be to build 4 full elevator shafts and 2 transition shafts. While losing that iconic scene is unfortunate, it is understandable given the limitations, and the addition of the mirror scene is a worthy replacement. Despite the changes, the ride was still wildly successful, which led Imagineers to start development on a new version of the ride over in Tokyo. Tokyo DisneySea opened their version of the Tower of Terror on September 22, 2006 to massive success, as if they already weren't the best park out there. However, there's something real strange about this ride. It is actually not themed to the Twilight Zone because in Japan they know very little about the Twilight Zone. Imagineers were tasked to come up with a completely original story for the attraction. They went with a New York-style hotel for the setting, and the ride would center around an explorer named Harrison Hightower III. Harrison Hightower is a member of the SEA, which stands for Society of Explorers and Adventurers. This society expands multiple Disney parks and multiple Disney rides, and it's super interesting, so if you haven't heard of this, I will leave a link in the description to a video that explains everything. Before you even enter the attraction, guests will notice the massive structure the ride is housed in. It's a completely different design based off of Gothic Revival architecture. You will also see news clippings highlighting Harrison's adventures and achievements, as well as Harrison Hightower's mysterious disappearance. Next, guests enter the hotel lobby, which is quite a bit more vibrant than previous versions of the Tower of Terror, with all the paintings and Harrison Hightower's prestigious decor. There is also an ominous broken elevator that is blocked off from guests, adding to the mystery of what happened to Harrison. Judging by all the news clippings, Harrison probably didn't have very much respect for all the artifacts he was taking and stashing in the hotel, which is a hint of how he met his demise. Guests then move along past the lobby into the pre-show, where it is revealed that Harrison and his partner took an artifact known as the Idol by force from an ancient tribe. As Hightower is stashing the idol at the hotel, he puts out a cigar on the top of the idol's head, causing it to glow green. The entire hotel then begins to glow green, and fires broke out throughout the whole building. Harrison was not found anywhere, only the idol where he once stood. The stained glass window in the room of Harrison then begins to come to life, and he warns us of the idol. The idol is conveniently right in front of you, and lights flash and the idol disappears. After that, the pre-show ends and guests move forward into the storage room where there are tons of Harrison Hightower's artifacts. Then guests head to the loading station where they finally board the ride. You rise up to the first scene of the ride where you see the idol which Hightower grabs. He then gets zapped by the idol and thrown down the elevator shaft. The room then fades to black and all you see is stars similar to the original Tower of Terror. The elevator doors then close and you rise up once again to a mirror scene where you are told to wave goodbye, very similar to California's version of the ride. The idol then flies at you and the drop sequence begins. And from here, you know the rest. You go up, you go down, you go up, you get a nice view of the park, you go back down, and then you exit into the gift shop as always. While the Tower of Terror in Tokyo may be very different from the other Tower of Terrors, over in Paris they would be returning to form. Walt Disney Studios in Paris opened their version of the Tower of Terror on December 22, 2007. It was essentially a clone of the California version. However, in 2019, Disney updated the ride with 3 brand new experiences depending on which shaft you ride in. Each experience centers around the little girl named Sally who disappears. Due to there being 3 separate ride experiences, I'll be going through them rapid fire style. The queue and the pre-show are the exact same as the California version, so I'll be skipping straight to the ride. The first shaft is titled The Malevolent Machine. The ride starts with a little girl named Sally singing "It's Raining, It's Pouring" in French while the lights flash. You are then pushed back into the shaft. You rise up to the mirror scene where she appears instead of the usual lightning. You then go through a mini drop sequence before arriving at the hallway scene. The 5 guests disappear like normal, but Sally appears and says, "Come with me before it's too late." And then the actual drop sequence begins. Shaft number 2 is called the Shaft Creatures. This shaft starts the same way with Sally singing. She then warns you if you scream it gets worse. Before you reach the first scene, you shoot up and drop 1 time, and then you arrive at the mirror scene, where Sally warns you not to scream once again. You rise once more to the hallway scene, which is now just the Starfield and Sally. The lights flicker and the hallway briefly appears. She reminds you once again to stay quiet, and then the final drop sequence begins. Shaft number 3 is titled The Fifth Dimension. Sally once again is singing "It's Raining, It's Pouring" and then asks, "Where have you gone?" You are then catapulted up and back down, arriving at the mirror scene. Sally appears and says, "I can't see you. Don't get lost in this dimension." You then drop again and then come back up to the hallway scene, only seeing the Starfield. Sally appears and says, "I'll get you back, just come with me." She then suddenly yells, "No," and the final drop sequence begins. This time purple and green lights are flashing everywhere. After it's over, she appears once again and says, "Next time you might not make it back." This would be the end of the story. However, Disney decided to retheme the California version of Tower of Terror to Guardians of the Galaxy. On January 3rd, 2017, Disney's California Adventure closed down the Tower of Terror to make way for a Guardians of the Galaxy overhaul. The ride would reopen only a few months later in May to mostly positive reception, but fans of the original Tower of Terror were not all too happy with the change. The ride featured a completely overhauled exterior and was themed to the Guardians getting trapped by the Collector, and Rocket Raccoon is on a mission to break out. Guests first move through the Collector's fortress, where there's a ton of artifacts he's collected over the years. Guests then make their way into the pre-show room, where it is revealed that the Collector has the Guardians trapped in electrified glass containers. The pre-show is then hijacked by an animatronic of Rocket Raccoon, and he explains his plan to break out the rest of the Guardians and escape.
Class begins! It's a foolproof plan!
Then guests move to what was once the boiler room and are assigned rows before boarding the ride. The ride starts with Rocket unplugging whatever the Collector had plugged in, and plugs in the Walkman, and one of 6 songs begins. Those 6 songs are "I Want You Back" by the Jackson 5, "Hit Me With Your Best Shot" by Pat Benatar, "Give Up the Funk" by Parliament, "Free Ride" by the Edgar Winter Group, "Burning Love" by Elvis Presley, and "Born to Be Wild" by Steppenwolf. Unlike the original Tower of Terror, pretty much the whole time you are on Mission Breakout you are getting thrown up and down. You first rise up to a generator, which Rocket then destroys, freeing the Guardians. You get launched up and down a bit and then arrive at the second scene, where there is a monster octopus thing called an abolist attacking the Guardians. You get launched up and down a bit, then the Guardians defeat the abolist but are chased off by enemy ships. This is when the final drop sequence begins, and you are thrown up and down over and over again. You then arrive at the final scene of the ride, where the Guardians are free and ready to escape. You are then launched up and down again just for the fun of it. The ride ends with the shadows of objects falling down the shaft as you arrive at the station. Guests then exit the ride and into the gift shop as always. That concludes every single version of the Tower of Terror explained. This was quite a behemoth of a video, especially for someone who has never taken on a project like this before. I'm thinking about not doing something like this for a while until I'm ready to take on another big video like this. Let me know in the comments what ride I should do next for this. There's also a bunch of links in the description for everything I use, like sources and footage and stuff. And of course, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video.